Hi, everybody. This is Klaas Ehlers. This is Klaas in 60 Seconds live on Facebook, where we have really interesting conversations with dynamic folks whose work intersects with our work at Family Promise. I'm the CEO of Family Promise. We're the largest organization in the country addressing family homelessness. We have 200 affiliates around the country. We served 177,000 people last year and involved 200,000 volunteers. So today's guests really know Family Promise well because they are both Family Promise team members. And we're going to be talking about a really important event that we hope will happen in the next 24 hours. And that is an extension of the eviction moratorium. Right now, the federal eviction moratorium is set to end of the day tomorrow. And the implications of that are pretty dire. And if we could get an extension on it, as well as some other actions, a lot of families can be spared the trauma and challenge of evictions. And ultimately, it's going to be a lot better for us on an economic and societal level, too, because causing homelessness, causing evictions is expensive as well as inhumane. So with that, I'm going to invite my two guests on. We have Lindsay Moore, who is our Midwest Regional Director, and we have Cassidy O'Lear, who works in our marketing department, has done a lot of research on the current eviction crisis and all the effects of the pandemic on the families that we serve. So welcome, Lindsay and Cassidy. How you all doing?
Great, thank you.
Good.
It's great to have you here. So, we're going to do sort of a primer on the eviction moratorium. So I think the place to start is, right, it's a few states have extensions, but in most states it is ending tomorrow. At the same time, $47 billion has been allocated from the government. So why is there a problem?
Well, evictions are nothing new, right? There are more than 3 million a year, nearly 4 million a year filed. What is new is the need. It is unprecedented. And states are finding it difficult to roll out systems to disperse the money. The funding's there, but the framework to get the money out isn't there. There are different requirements. There are, different processes, and courts themselves with COVID found themselves shutting down. They, state workers were working from home. They had challenges, sometimes sicknesses. So the system wasn't set up for this extreme demand.
I know I saw I'm forgetting who said it now, but it was a Washington Post article where someone described it as steering the Titanic while building the Titanic at the exact same time, which I thought was a really good way to describe it. It's just definitely, there's a lot of roadblocks with trying to build this infrastructure and these resources that we just never had, simply just didn't exist. And now having to catch up on that very quickly for millions of families is going to be a problem, obviously. And I think just the fact that certain tenants and small landlords have not even been aware that the assistance is available to them is another added barrier. So just the lack of infrastructure and lack of outreach combined is making it really, really hard to get it out in time.
Yeah, and I think it's less than 7% of the money has been dispersed so far, yet the eviction moratorium ends tomorrow, right? So there's all this money sitting there, but families are going to get evicted, right? It's such a illogical approach to take. And I think one of the things too that we've seen is that there's the requirements to be able to qualify are rather daunting. If we could have a self-income attestation, right, based on zip code, that would really expedite matters, because we know if families are living in a low-income community, it's probably legitimate that they do not have the income to be able to afford the rent. And again, you can always go back and address things on the back end, but anything we can do to prevent those evictions on the front end would be so critical. So, what else do you see as ways that we could expedite this or ameliorate these gaps in services? And what are you seeing on the affiliate level?
I think affiliates right now are trying to really brace themselves for the calls coming and really trying to make sure they have solid relationships in the community with the court systems, with other partners doing financial assistance to families, and really making sure that they have a solid pipeline for referrals between all of those different ways of gaining access to assistance. Because, in addition to the billions of dollars out there, there's millions of families out there. The number fluctuates, but you've got 7 million Americans right now who are behind on rent, and they could be the folks facing eviction if there aren't changes being made. So, they're really just trying to make sure that those pieces of the community puzzle are well in place ahead of this, and getting social media messaging out there, and really making sure that those who have maybe never experienced a need for assistance know how to get it, and then are prepared to help with the filings. Klaus, you brought up how daunting it is. You need to scan in documents a lot of times, locating documents, getting copies of things. If folks don't have a home office setup or access to that technology, then what? So they're just looking at all the different ways they're going to need to assist in their communities.
I know you pretty much covered it, Lindsay, being the person that's definitely more familiar with the affiliates, but I've definitely seen on the marketing end, just on social media, how many of them have just been trying to get the word out as much as possible to as many families as they can, to just say that we're ready to help, and here's how you can reach out to us, and these are the services that we provide, which is really, I think, all that at this point we can do. I know a lot of them have, partnerships in their local communities that they've worked on to make this even easier. I think our affiliate in Philadelphia has a partnership with the Homeowners Association there to make it so that landlords can refer families to Family Promise rather than just filing an eviction, which is huge. And I'm sure there's plenty of other affiliates working on, similar partnerships to make this as easy as possible on families.
Yeah, Cassidy, I think that's a really important point, right? A lot of this is about mediation, because we're dealing with an ecosystem here. So landlords themselves are crunched. They do need that revenue coming in. And I think you mentioned that a majority of sort of individual investor landlords, right, the mom and pop landlords, don't even know this exists, as well as a lot of tenants don't know this exists. So the more that we can bring information, and the more that we can create mediation, so that rather than doing an eviction, which is so disruptive and harmful to the family, but also is expensive and disruptive to the landlord, can we do mediation? Can we get us, if families can apply for the funding, can we stay their evictions until we get that resolved, so that the funding comes in? Because the landlord's going to then get the money that they need. And I think one thing I've seen too is mandating that landlords cannot file an eviction without making tenants aware of the American Recovery Plan and the and CARES Act and various other funding that those families can access. So, Lindsay, is anything you'd want to highlight? You represent our Midwest. You're a proud Michigander, as evidenced by what's over your right shoulder. So have you seen any affiliates doing anything particularly dynamic in preparation and to address this upcoming crisis?
Family Province Lawrence has really done a tremendous job in Kansas of really galvanizing the community in putting funding together, orchestrating response. Family Promise in Anoka, in Minnesota, has been already working with the court systems to do mediation ahead of this crisis. So they've got inroads there. Even Family Promise of Lynn County in Iowa is working in prevention for the first time. So when we talk about prevention, that's preventing an eviction. So funding toward that. They've been really good at building those community strongholds and have been effective at preventing evictions. So those are some of really the stars from our area who are doing new things programming wise and really seeing the return on investment come through for those families.
And I'll add, you mentioning the return on investment. And I mentioned this on the interview I did earlier today with Yahoo Finance. It's estimated that rental assistance has somewhere between a 208 and 466% return on investment, right? So, we all know sort of the, an ounce of prevention for pound of cure, like all those sort of things that we were taught growing up, how important it is to do things preemptorily, that you can make small investments on the front end that will yield great impact, as opposed to letting things go and then having to make these major investments and these ongoing kind of unsolvable investments, right? And that's what, when you let families slide into homelessness, you see all those detrimental impacts on the children themselves, right? In terms of their educational attainment, their future, career attainment, all these other systems that have to get involved because those families are so traumatized and so disenfranchised. That's obviously the human reason should be the number one reason you want to do something, but just societally and economically, it's just terrible policy. Cassidy, anything you want to add to that?
I think echoing you, I just completely agree. I feel like when you said on the human level alone, outside of policy, it's kind of shocking to see people not have the empathy to want to help these families and realize what a big issue this is, and then to see all the other numbers that show that obviously the extension of the moratorium is necessary and that we should be doing everything we can to prevent this crisis. It's crazy to see it not going the way that we want it to.
It is insane to me when you look at just the sheer numbers, because, Klaus, you're comparing it to an ecosystem is very true, because it is not just about the family losing a home and thinking as a fellow American, oh, this doesn't affect me because I may not lose my home. It will, in the long term, impact you, because an eviction, Urban Institute found that an eviction costs a community between $2,500 and $12,000 in the trickle down effects, foster care for children, healthcare impacts. And if the government has to pay for then assistance to these families displaced by eviction, then you're looking at taxes perhaps going up. And so that impacts all of us. So you've got an opportunity to stave off this entire crisis by keeping families where they are at a time that's critical. Klaus, you also mentioned on Yahoo Finance, in August is when many students return to school. So the idea of losing a home while trying to navigate the start of school, possibly virtually, possibly in classrooms, there's so many variables right now, is incredibly daunting and heartbreaking. So when you put it all together, it is the human cost, the financial cost. It just doesn't make sense not to build in interventions and preventions when it comes to, what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that we're not talking about an infinite eviction moratorium. And you can make arguments for that, but that would be a total restructuring of the marketplace of housing. But we're talking about just an extension to allow this money to get there, because the money is there, right? So it's not saying, okay, landlords, you're going to have to wait another 6 months, and there's things we can do to get money to landlords to help support landlords, because they're part of this ecosystem. We don't want them going under, particularly the mom and pop landlords, who are disproportionately more likely to be renting to lower income renters, right? So we're just talking about give it a little bit more time so that the money that's on its way can get there. So we have Sandra has made a note about accessing information, where and how to start, and I think that's a really, really good question, because there are people watching that may directly or maybe very closely connected to people who could who need that help. So what is your advice for people that would need to access services that may be in arrears, maybe having an eviction filed, or fear that one will be filed soon?
When it comes to, and we can put this link in the chat, but the Consumer Protection Bureau released a tool yesterday for any American to be able to drill down where assistance is available in their state. Family Promise is always a great place to start, but sometimes we may not have an affiliate where you are. So, you can locate our affiliates on our website. If there is an affiliate near you, absolutely connect, and they'll help you get to what's needed. But that other tool developed through the Consumer Protection Bureau is an absolute necessity for those who might be facing eviction or facing crisis. So that's the best place to start.
Yeah, and speaking about affiliates, to our affiliates, in the past few years, we've really worked with our affiliates on expanding their programs in prevention and diversion. Diversion is when families are homeless, but how do you maybe prevent them from coming into shelter and divert them to another suitable arrangement? And I think because of that, what we've seen is a lot of our affiliates have actually been in the lead in their local communities on the implementation of the funding for rental assistance and other programs. Cassie, anything you want to add before I pose my last question to the two of you?
Well, one thing I'd say, and this is a Gen Z perspective, but as far as the people providing services and our affiliate directors, I feel like it's really important to note that they too have to be taking care of themselves and in the right headspace for this, because it's such an overwhelming time, of course, for families, but also for those that are providing these services. So making sure that they take that time to be ready to help people by mentally preparing and just being in the right headspace, which I know is sort of the self-care perspective that my generation goes with. But I think it's really important to note that on top of these families having to deal with such an emotional and overwhelming time.
No, Cassidy has a really important point, right? It goes to, if you're on an airplane, they say put your oxygen mask on yourself before you assist others. Because you cannot, if you do not take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to have the impact that you want to have. So the last question is, and I'll ask this of Lindsay, because Cassidy, as you mentioned, you're too young officially to get this role. But we'll give you a good secretary, a good department head position, secretary of HUD or whatever. But Lindsay, if you were president and Cassidy, you were the appropriate secretary of a department, what would you do and why?
It is such a big question. Honestly, I think looking at the different interventions that lawmakers control or have influence over, starting with the court systems, is critical. The Associate Attorney General, Vanita Gupta, issued an edict to courts asking them to change the way they handled evictions, giving them some, suggestions for requiring landlords to apply for assistance before filing for evictions, extending the time period that the tenants have to respond or appear in court so that assistance can be doled out, and then modifying the summonses. So when a family gets served with an eviction, not only is it a gut-wrenching moment of terror and panic when you may not have a place for your child to live or a place to stay that's safe for yourself, you are not given a lot of information. It doesn't come with a list of, here are some opportunities for assistance. Here are your avenues for legal representation. So our court systems are a big piece of this. And so if I were given that presidential power, it would be to mandate courts to respond accordingly in communities, especially on the eve of the moratorium expiring, because right now only 4 out of our 50 states have protections in place at the court level that are saying, you can't evict if there is an application for assistance in play. So that would be my push if that were my role, would be for the courts to have a stronger response.
Thank you for that, Madam President. Secretary O'Lear, what would you add?
God, I feel like you do a much better job than me, Lindsay. I think, not necessarily specific to this instance, but overall, if I were president, I think I would, or secretary, I'm jumping ahead of the game, I would probably put just the education around housing injustice and housing discrimination and homelessness as just a much higher role on my agenda and just make sure that people were really aware of how big an issue it is. I think people, especially before the pandemic, were able to just kind of ignore it or pretend that they didn't see it. And now at least it's in our faces more. But I think it should be definitely higher on everyone's radar and talked about more so that people know how to advocate on behalf of other people and actually take action outside of, us and Family Promise, who are very aware of the issue.
Thank you. Thanks, Cassidy. Lindsay, Cassidy, thank you guys so much. I would ask Mitch to play Stars and Stripes Forever, but I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. But I will ask Mitch, as Secretary of Communication, if he maybe add at some point to the links here, to the chat, a couple of links on Facebook so that people have some of those places they can go to. Thank you guys so much. You guys are just such awesome members of the team here. You do so much to help our affiliates, to help families, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Thank you. You too.